It's just been 5 days since Novak Djokovic infamously announced his medical exemption to the world, and there have been even more details revealed about his visa cancellation and deportation case. If you didn't know, Novak is currently being held in an immigration hotel, awaiting a decision on whether he'll be allowed into Australia. The Australian Border Force said that he didn't meet appropriate visa requirements. So we've currently established that the panels created by Tennis Australia and the Victorian Health Departments made a huge mistake in granting Novak the medical exemption in the first place. They allowed a pass for players who had an acute illness or those who had contracted the virus within the last 6 months. However, the Australian Border Force doesn't give vaccine exceptions for people trying to enter the country with an exemption due to positive COVID infection. As I mentioned in my last video about this, Tennis Australia and its CEO Craig Tiley should bear most of the responsibility for creating an invalid exemption system. Moreover, new details have come out, and after reading them, I definitely think resignation is in store for Tiley. According to the Age of Australia, Tiley wrote a letter to the Australian Technical Advisory Group on immunization, pressing the expert group on whether players with a recent COVID-19 infection or a single dose of vaccine will be exempt from immigration rules requiring people to come to Australia to be fully vaccinated. Tiley appears to vouch for Djokovic, telling the ATAGI, "The treatment of players who fall within one of these categories goes to the heart of the viability of the Australian Open." Back in November, the ATAGI told Tiley multiple times in writing that a single vaxxed or recently infected player would not be exempt. However, Tennis Australia still sent out a notice to players in early December, telling them that a recent infection was, quote, clarified as a category for which you may be eligible for a temporary medical exemption. Tennis Australia also made a statement to the Herald Sun where they say, "We reject completely that the playing group was knowingly misled. Informing players they could get into the country on a medical exemption was taken from the Smart Traveler website that Greg Hunt directly referred us to." This statement is very wishy-washy because, for one, they were told multiple times that an exemption would not be granted for previous COVID infection. Then two, the website they're referring to has no information about prior COVID infection being a valid vaccination exception. Tiley also just made his first public statement since Djokovic's detainment, essentially saying the same thing, that they were misled and that he shouldn't take the blame because Tennis Australia was constantly in talks with different departments about the exemption requirements. Now, people have defended Tiley, saying that Novak's denial was merely a political move to save face amidst the controversy of even allowing him into the country. This is because another player was granted entry into Australia for the same COVID infection exemption Novak used. Renata Voracova of the Czech Republic was removed from the country after being detained by Border Force for apparently failing to meet the federal government requirements that all non-citizens be vaccinated against COVID. This is extremely fishy because Voracova was already allowed into the country prior to this Djokovic mess and already had played a doubles match in Melbourne. This just makes me believe even more that if Novak hadn't come public with the exemption, both he and Renata would have likely gotten through this scotch-free. There could be some other reasoning for the Border Force allowing Voracova through, but still both the Force and Tennis Australia should be held accountable. Now, this doesn't mean to me that Novak is a victim, as other people have been saying, and is totally innocent, because he likely knew that he wasn't going to get vaccinated for the Aussie Open, and instead of actually having a valid reason for not getting the shot, he's using a sketchy COVID infection from a month ago. According to the BBC, Djokovic's lawyers actually say that the world number one tested positive for the virus on December 16th. This was honestly a big mistake on the lawyers' part because, for one, it makes Novak look bad. Djokovic attended an awards ceremony for kids at the Novak Tennis Center on November the 17th. Then on December 18th, he did a photo shoot, unmasked might I add, after being crowned Leah Keeps Champion for Champions for 2021. As Sarah Elise Garvey on Twitter mentioned, this means 3 different things. 1. Novak tested positive for COVID and still did these things, putting others at risk of catching the virus. Then 2. Novak's lawyer said that the positive PCR test was recorded on the 16th, so that could also just mean that he took the test that day and got the results back later. If that is the case somehow, Novak was awaiting the results of a COVID test and still did these things maskless, which isn't really responsible. Then the third suspicion is that Djokovic and whoever else faked the positive test altogether. I'm not sure I not completely buy this because Novak did attend a basketball game in Serbia on the 14th of December where he took a picture with player Nigel Hayes. 2 days later, Hayes tested positive for COVID, so that event very well could have been a super spreader that Novak could have contracted the virus from. That timeline also exposes Tennis Australia even more because according to their documents, the deadline for applying for an exemption was December 10th, almost a week prior to Novak's COVID infection. This means that Tennis Australia clearly bent the rules for Novak to allow him to submit past the deadline, which caused him to question whether the Serb's medical documents were truly anonymous when reviewed by the panels, as Tiley told the press. This also doesn't make Novak look good because with him contracting COVID past the exemption deadline, it proves that he never intended on being vaccinated for this event, rather than the infection being a roadblock from him getting the jab. Now, to my anti-vaxxers and vaccine skeptics in the comments, I'm just simply saying that with Australia's guidelines and how strict they are with this pandemic and the vaccines, Novak should not be let into the country, simple as that. I do think that Voracova's case is interesting and I'd definitely like to know more about it. Like, for example, when did she contract the virus and did she want to get the vaccine but could not because of getting the infection? Once again, I think Border Force kicking her out isn't right morally at all because according to their rules, she shouldn't have even been let into the country, so why put her through this in the first place? I can't stress enough how much of a mess this is, but there does appear to be an underlying positive throughout it all. Novak is currently staying at the Park Hotel in the suburbs of Melbourne, the same hotel where asylum seekers are currently staying. While the Serb hasn't enjoyed the food nor insects at the hotel, these people have been confined to such conditions in detention centers in Australia for over 9 years. The Australian government has done nothing to grant these innocent people their basic human rights, which reveals another layer of corruption here. Hopefully something is done about this as more people raise awareness. This is going to be the last time I'll talk about this visa drama until the hearing on Monday, which is open to the public on Microsoft Teams at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. However, things are guaranteed to get messy either way because Australia just came out with a statement saying that even if Novak's appeal is successful, they can still re-detain him immediately. A mess. I do want to emphasize that there are bigger things in the world going on than this matter, like the refugee issue as I just mentioned. Also, Peng Shuai turns 36 years old today, and I wish her both a happy birthday and overall safety, peace, and good well-being. I also want to briefly shout out our title winners from this morning. Felix Auger-Aliassime and Denis Shapovalov earned convincing straight-set wins over Spain's Roberto Bautista Agut and Pablo Carreño Busta to clinch the ATP Cup for Canada. Gael Monfils has returned to the winner's circle, picking up his first title down under and 11th overall after beating Karen Khachanov 6-4, 6-4 at the Adelaide International. Home country favorite Ash Barty took home the women's event, capping off a stellar week of tennis with a dominant 3-2 win over Rybakina. Simona Halep was also dominant during her final at the Melbourne Summer Set 1, beating Veronika Kudermetova 6-2, 6-3 for her 23rd career singles title. Then Amanda Anisimova claimed the Melbourne Summer Set 2 event, fighting back from injury to upend Alexandra Sasnovich 7-5, 1-6, 6-4 for her second tour title and first since 2019. And then lastly, Rafael Nadal won title number 89 in Melbourne, surviving Serb involunteer Maxime Cressy in straight sets, winning 7-6, 6-3. That's it for this video, and let me know in the comments what you think about the information the lawyers gave about Djokovic's positive test, and whether you think this hurts his chances of being granted access into Australia. Also, how do you feel about Tennis Australia's extensive efforts to get the defending champ access? Make sure you all subscribe and click the notification bell so you're notified about this case in addition to other tennis results. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Grand Slam Tennis News Today.